Clowns have had an interesting and roller coaster timeline that stretches back centuries. There was a time not so long ago when clowns were thought of as playful and childlike, virtually harmless aside from potentially suffering from an ink stain via a flower lapel. So what changed? It feels like there has always been an undercurrent of creepiness when it comes to clowns. I wanted to know why, because it's not just one or two overly fearful kids that are afraid of clowns. This is a phenomenon. Circuses have held workshops to help visitors get over their trepidation of clowns. There was a report conducted by the BBC featuring a child psychologist who claimed very few children like clowns because they are unfamiliar and seem to come from a different era. The children didn't think they looked funny, they just looked odd.
What's the matter, kid? Don't you like clowns? Why? Don't we make you laugh? Aren't we fucking funny?
There is even a specific phobia for clowns. And it's not just a random phobia that is rare. It's actually one of the most common phobias people experience. Even some beloved celebrities like P. Diddy, Johnny Depp, and Daniel Radcliffe claim to have the phobia. So where did the shift happen? And how did it happen? Was it a flip of a switch, or was it something that heated slowly until it reached a ferocious boil? To get to the answers, we need to go way back to understand the origin of the clown, what its purpose was, and what effect the clowns had on their audience. There are variations of clowns that can be found in almost every culture, so the term clown isn't going to come up until about the 16th century. So when I say the first recorded clown was in the 5th dynasty of the Egyptian Empire, I'm not referring to Ronald McDonald chilling in the pyramids.
Ew, McNuggets gross me out. McNuggets.
We will actually be starting with an origin that is just as dark as it is mysterious. And it's strange, I have only found like a few paragraphs basically reciting the same information over and over again about the first recorded clown. 4,500 years ago, Pharaoh Dadkari Asai purchased an African pygmy dancer from a merchant who promised the small fellow would delight. From this small amount of information I gathered, I actually learned quite a lot. Pygmy dancer. Let's start there. Let's dissect that a bit. The term pygmy can be considered offensive, and it also can be used as a pejorative term, so I apologize if that is insensitive. But the word itself helped me identify the origins, so that is why I'm using the same term that the Egyptians used all those years ago. In anthropology, pygmy peoples are ethnic groups whose average height is unusually short. These groups were primarily located in Central Africa. They were captured and sold in Egypt, where ironically the Egyptians gave them great respect. They believed the pygmy peoples, who they referred to as Dangas, held celestial powers. Obviously, thousands of years ago, things were very different. But regardless of how much respect was there, the Dangas were property. What the Egyptians labeled respect, I view as fetishized, but that's my personal opinion. I find it very interesting that the first recording of a clown was a purchase, and this clown is explained as if they're a product. They were captured from their home from a highly discriminated against group, and the sole purpose for this product was to entertain someone in power. And their entertainment factor lied in their height, because that was the butt of the joke. This person had to force this goofiness and put on a show to make someone else laugh after they were torn away from their home, torn away from their family, torn away from their culture, torn away from everything. They had to put that aside and put on a front so that they probably wouldn't get killed. The complexity and sadness that lied in just a few sentences was the start of an extended pattern that went on for centuries. I do believe the Danga clown, its origins, its entire experience, remained at the core and the heart of clowns from this point on, whether they knew it or not. 5 centuries later, we are introduced to parasites in Greece. Parasites translates to guess in Greek. and these guests were an elevated variation of the danga. They were skilled in repartee, tumbling, tricks, mimicry, and singing. Think of Robin Hood and his band of merry men in Shrek.
Wicked down.
The parasites also brought a potentially dangerous type of comedy that poked fun at the king and criticized royal rule. This was done by playing the wise fool. The wise fool could be offensive and critical and never be punished for this behavior. Neatly wrapping true critiques inside a blanket of humor is still something very few comedians get right, but when it is done correctly, it is genius.
We'll see how positive you're feeling after I cover your body in gasoline and set you on fire.
You know what? It's amazing that you would say that, because I was just thinking it's getting a little chilly in here. Thanks so much, man.
That comedic criticism was also taking place in the eastern part of the world. For 1,000 years, court jesters in China were a regular source of entertainment. One clown/jester stood out among the rest. Yu Zi used the same method as parasites, and in his case, he was on a serious mission to stop the emperor Shi Huangdi from painting the Great Wall. And I mean, it's the Great Wall. To say it's massive, we all know that's an understatement. It's over 13,000 miles long, similar to the perimeter of all 48 states as one body, in addition to Alaska and Hawaii's circumference. Construction on the wall lasted over 2,300 years. Different sections of the wall were built, destroyed, and renovated by 9 dynasties. So slapping some paint on this was not some cute little DIY project. Many laborers died in the process of construction, and this new project would certainly kill many more. In what seemed like an innocent rendition of The Wise Fool, Yu Zi laughed at the emperor's idea to paint the wall, holding the weight of his country on his shoulders and potentially putting his life in danger. Incredibly, the emperor did in fact change his mind. The next shift in clownery took place in 12th century Germany, with Till Eulenspiegel, the equal opportunist trickster. Till Eulenspiegel translates in High German to owl mirror. Owls often represent wisdom and independent thinking, so possibly could mean holding a mirror to society and showing the foolishness. I also read that in Low German, it translates to Tulspiegel. I'm sorry if I butcher this. And what that means is wiping your bottom. But keep in mind, the Low Common German language at that time is very hard to translate, so I couldn't exactly verify this. I scanned the Plautdietsch dictionary, which is the language, and it had over 17,000 entries. None of them had Tulspiegel, nothing even close. But I will say, I would not be at all surprised if this was in fact what it meant. That double entendre really just seems to ring true for a clown. The clown delivered important messages that were wrapped in silliness and crass humor that entertained the listener so that they would receive the message even if they didn't realize it. In 1520 AD, Herman Cortez, a Spanish conquistador, conquered the Aztec Empire. He was shocked when he saw Montezuma's court had fools, dwarfs, and hunchbacks all for entertainment. Cortez was like, oh man, what a treat, let's wrap those bad boys up, I'll take them to go. And to go they went, as a gift from Cortez to Pope Clement VII.
I am the gift.
Most Native American tribes had a variation of the fool or the clown, and they played an incredibly important role in the tribe's culture. They were the originators of the Patch Adams theory of laughter being medicinal.
The American Journal of Medicine has found that laughter increases secretion of catecholamines and endorphins, which in turn increases oxygenation of the blood, relaxes the arteries, speeds up the heart, decreases blood pressure, which has a positive effect on all cardiovascular and respiratory ailments, as well as overall increasing the immune system response.
And again, we see this clown being highly respected in its culture. 16th century European theater birthed the Harlequin clown. The Commedia dell'arte was a popular and highly improvised type of theater, usually consisting of characters like foolish old men, devious servants, officers full of false bravado. Everything was over the top and very dramatic, One character from the commedia was the Harlequin or the Little Devil. The Harlequin was a rustic fool and believed to be specifically introduced by Zani Ganassa. The Harlequin is characterized by the checkered costume and its light-hearted and nimble attitude, usually the astute servant thwarting the plans of its master. Harlequins would also hold a bate or a slapstick, which was a magic wand used by the character to change the scenery of the play, and also made an exaggerated slap when hitting another character. In England, another major shift for clowns was taking place in the hands of Joseph Grimaldi. He was the first recognizable ancestor of the modern-day clown. Grimaldi was the celebrity of his time, and his impact is still felt in the clown community today. There's even a clown church in East London that has a Sunday service in his honor every year since 1959. And at this service, everyone comes in their full clown getup. Before Joseph Grimaldi, makeup on clowns wasn't all that common. His variation of a clown, in style anyways, was a next-level Harlequin. He stepped up the costumes and would wear boots with huge spurs made of brass dishes, costumes decorated in diamonds, circles, tassels, and ruffs. He contrasted the black mask worn by the Harlequin with a face painted stark white, a blue mohawk, and a large mouth painted on. Grimaldi was a master of physical comedy, utilizing acrobatics and miming. As I mentioned, Joseph Grimaldi's Joey the Clown was famous, and so that style of clown became the blueprint from that point forward. I do believe that Grimaldi's backstory is just as critical to the evolution of clowns as the comedy was and the extravagant costumes. I think all of it was relevant. He grew up with a tyrant stage father, his wife died during childbirth, his son drank himself to death at 31, and no surprise, Grimaldi struggled with depression. And on top of all of that, Grimaldi's very intense physical activity took a toll on his body. It left him in chronic pain and prematurely disabled. I am grim all day, but I make you laugh at night. Grimaldi ended up dying penniless and addicted to alcohol. Before he died, he penned his autobiography, Memories of Joseph Grimaldi, and in a full circle moment was edited by Charles Dickens. A young Charles Dickens was mesmerized when he saw Grimaldi's performance as Joey the Clown. Dickens was simply asked to tidy up the autobiography, and the 25-year-old ended up mostly rewriting the entire thing, keeping the greatest pantomime clown in the spotlight eternally. Dickens' depiction was the start of us questioning what's underneath the stark makeup and the ruffles. I do believe that this memoir was planting the seeds of the scary clown. Some even credit Dickens with the invention of the scary clown, period. Maybe not the murderous, crawl out of your shower drain, or scalping you kind of evil clown. But Dickens expressed that Grimaldi was literally destroying himself for other people's entertainment, and that is pretty scary. Dickens' depiction of Grimaldi really started to make people question what was under the stark makeup and the ruffles. The Memoirs of Joseph Grimaldi was extremely popular. Lots of people were now privy to Grimaldi's story. It added another layer to the complexities of a clown and really weaved in more dark undertones to the clown lore. As you can imagine, with his insane popularity, Grimaldi inspired basically every clown that followed him. This was certainly true of French clown Jean-Gaspard Dubois' Pierrot. The Pierrot clown had the same intense white face makeup, jarring red lip, and intense black eyebrows. Dubois was also very famous, but he was disturbed in more ways than one. In 1836, Dubois killed a boy with a blow from his walking stick after the youth shouted insults to him on the street.
That was an overreaction.
Alarmingly, Dubois was acquitted, but you know, what happened, and people knew about it. And now this extremely famous clown, in addition to Grimaldi, another famous clown, both had this dark cloud over their heads. And really a dark cloud over clowns in general, a cloud that would grow darker and more ominous as the years went on. As the entertainment industry expanded, even with humble beginnings, fictional stories about clowns kind of took on a life of their own. In 1849, Edgar Allan Poe published the short story Hop Frog, a tale of a man with dwarfism and a bit of a limp who is labeled a cripple and made into a jester for the king. We end up rooting for Hop Frog because of how poorly he's being treated. We want the underdog, or rather the underfrog, to transcend.
Comedy gold.
Even as he commits a crazy act of revenge. It's a much darker take on the Harlequin, actions and motives wise, but also has the themes of being a, quote, freak, unquote, due to his conditions. In 1892, an Italian opera titled Pagliacci, translated to Clowns, turned the clown into a revenge-driven, murdering demon yet again. The main character, inspired by Grimaldi, murders his cheating wife on stage during the performance. It was quite a disturbing scene, once again weaving another dark layer into this complex clown braid. And now we're gonna tackle the circus, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the uglier. I chose to place the circus and the explanation of the circus at this point of the video, at this point in the timeline, which is around 1900, because that's when the circus as we know it really started to pop off. I am gonna quickly skim the history of the circus because I am me and I like the origins of everything. The circus started in ancient Rome. It was actually the building that the spectacle took place in. The name itself derives from the Latin word circus, which is the romanticization of the Greek word kirkos, which itself is the metathesis of the Homeric Greek krikos, which means circle or ring or loop. Yes, 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 all of this hubla for a word that basically means circle. In the book De Spectaculis, early Christian writer Tertullian claimed that the first circus games were staged by the goddess Circe, in honor of her father Helios, the sun god. In the ring of the ancient Rome circus, there were chariot races, equestrian shows, staged battles. This is basically your local major arena, like where you go to see concerts. This is all still happening. Well, like chariot races are more of a Daytona type circus, you know?
What can you tell us about Daytona Bike Week?
That is in Daytona and it involves bikes.
Thank you.
But horse shows and stage battles, we still know all about those. Have we even evolved that much? Probably not. I cannot dive down that rabbit hole. Not an existential one. Moving on. Something really cool and progressive of ancient Rome. The circus was the only event where men and women could be sat together and not separated in public. Snaps for equality. Am I right? Let's go, ancient Rome. With the fall of Rome, these large circus arenas fell as well. And animal trainers, performers, showmen, etc. opted to take their talents on the road and would travel to local fairs to perform. The origin for the modern circus has been attributed to Philip Astley. He set up the first amphitheater in Lambeth, London in 1768. He was the first to have animal trainers and trick horse riders, clowns, and acrobats all in the same space put together to perform a whole show. His show took place in a ring and his rivals copied, and circuses have been performed in a 42-foot diameter ring ever since. We didn't hear the term circus until Charles Dibdin in 1782 opened the Royal Circus in London. Astley, the originator, opened many more permanent amphitheaters throughout Europe, but it wouldn't be until 1826 that a circus took place under a canvas big top. Englishman John Bill Ricketts brought the first modern circus to the US of A.
more specifically in Philadelphia in 1793. It was a great success, and George Washington even attended a performance later that year. Many small-scale but still exciting circuses popped up over the next 2 decades, building more and more awareness of the circus's existence as well as building excitement for it as well. In 1825, under the first American Big Top, Americans are introduced to what would become the most famous pre-Civil War circus clown at the hands of Dan Rice. And in 1897, the circus was revolutionized with the longest traveling circus, the Barnum and Bailey Greatest Show on Earth. Now the circus traveled by train, easily transporting the show from town to town. The circus was now multiple rings. It was bigger, grander, and more outrageous. Simple horse tricks turned into more dangerous stunts and ambitious acrobatics. The beauty and modesty of the humble circus was long gone. Some appreciated the grandiosity, others preferred the simplicity and intimacy of the original circus. What something old and newer old circuses had in common is they both marketed to adults. I mean, kids came too, but adults were their target audience. And the clowns' performances at the time really showed that. They'd pop in between thrilling and chilling acts to provide comedic relief, and their routines were full of dark comedy for adults to unpack. It wasn't like Three Stooges batch on the head humor. It was kind of deeper than that. Before moving on to the Depression era clowns, we do have to discuss the dark, horrific corner of clown culture, I guess you could say. As I mentioned, we're doing the good, the bad, the ugly, and the racist. Yes, folks, we're going to talk about minstrelsy because, yeah, it's a horrific variation of the clown. If you are unaware, minstrelsy is a comedic performance put on by white people donning blackface, and they are depicting stereotypes of blackness with exaggerated features and costumes. They wildly distorted the features and the culture of African Americans and made a mockery of their appearance, their dancing, their language, their deportment, their culture as a whole. Because in my humble opinion, the white people that were specifically involved in minstrelsy were performing their own kind of Till Eulenspiegel, reflecting their own grotesque attributes onto society because they're fearful of the unknown. TLDR, they were self-reporting. By 1830, the character Jim Crow became the most well-known minstrel, and it actually sparked an entire sub-industry because capitalism, I mean, they sold sheet masks, costumes, makeup to put on. It was insanely popular. Minstrelsy was at its peak between the end of the Civil War and the turn of the century in the northern states and the Midwest states. Why, you may ask? African Americans weren't populating those areas, so these people never met black people. They never came into contact with them. Hence the ignorance, hence the absolute grotesque actions. From ignorance comes ignorance. I don't know if that was already said by some famous philosopher in much prettier words, but I'm saying it now. Unfortunately, minstrelsy, because of its crazy popularity, went on for a very long time. Popular American entertainers were even doing this. Shirley Temple, Judy Garland, Mickey Rooney. All of them donned blackface for some performances, but to be fair, these were literal children that were heavily exploited and forced into doing things that they didn't want to do or things they didn't understand by very predatory movie production studios. I only share that detail because no matter if someone forced their hand or not, these were tangible and recognizable stars that were normalizing blackface. And they were also good, wholesome actors and actresses. And to the average American family that was ignorant, they said, hey, if Judy Garland's doing it, then it must be fine, right? And also, those were actors and actresses that were alive in my lifetime. So that type of buffoonery, not that far from us, not that far back in history. That's all. Now that we have shed light on that dark corner, let's move on back to the American circus, specifically the Depression era clown. Hobo clowns and tramps took center stage. These were sad clowns played by entertainers like Emmett Kelly's Weary Willie. His performance, like many clowns at the time, was a reflection of America's financial crisis in the 1930s. In 1940, we experience a new sort of villainous clown, simply named the Joker in Batman #1. He's portrayed as a criminal mastermind and introduced as a warped psychopath with a sadistic sense of humor. A decade later, televisions entered American homes, and we began to see the marketing of clowns to children. Now we have layers of exploitation, depression, fear, mystique, racism, sadness, comedy. Really just the most complex character you could possibly imagine. And at this point, they were molding that complex character into a soft, cuddly, goofy pal that kids should feel safe with. Oh, and also, rolling off the back of Cecil B. DeMille's Greatest Show on Earth, which was an Oscar-winning film. You don't need to watch it. Oscar-winning my ass cheek. No. The important takeaway is Buttons the Clown in the film is really a former doctor/escaped murderer who was hiding under his makeup in the circus. It's weird, Buttons never ever removes the makeup, it's never a thing brought up in the story, it's just like, yeah, Buttons, the eternal clown with clogged pores. Another psycho killer clown with bad skin. Let's turn that character of a clown into a mascot for children. Clarabelle the Clown was the total opposite of Buttons. Clarabelle had her first performance a few weeks after Howdy Doody premiered in 1947, but the Howdy Doody show was at peak popularity during the 50s. The Howdy Doody show, by the way, is like a sketch show for kids. Well, really for everybody, but kind of a kid-based audience. Clarabelle wore a baggy striped costume and only communicated by horn honking and seltzer zaps. Then came Bozo the Clown, who was a popular franchise. Yes, Bozo the Clown was indeed a franchise. Many local TV stations in the US produced their own form of a Bozo show. But in 1965, Bozo's Big Top was produced for syndication to any local TV market that wasn't already producing their own Bozo show. Bozo's Circus went national via cable in 1978, launching Bozo into the clown stratosphere. To say that Bozo was a celebrity is an understatement. There was a 10-year wait to be on his show. I don't know how that's even possible, but that is what I read. As popular as Bozo was, he was not alone in the 60s when it came to clowns. Americans were not only loving their boob tubes and microwaves and Nat King Cole Christmas bops, but they were also loving some fast food, specifically loving McDonald's. Burgers and fries were quick, easy, cheap, tasty, simple, and consistent. Things that parents specifically were drawn to feed their screaming, picky-eating child in the back seat. The genius marketing team at the new fast food chain, spreading like a wildfire through the country, was aware of this, and in 1963, they rolled out their mascot, Ronald McDonald. A smiling clown with a white painted face, exaggerated arched black brows, a red nose, and an overdrawn red mouth. Ronald McDonald was also dressed in a yellow jumpsuit with red and white striped undergarments and shiny bright red massive shoes. Everything about this character drew children in. Even the colors, red being highly visible and attention-grabbing, and yellow associated with joy and energy. Ronald McDonald's motley crew of interesting and fun characters that were familiar but fantastical gave children even more characters to fall in love with. Ronald McDonald is a genius lesson in marketing, specifically to very young children drawn to colors. Ronald McDonald, in my opinion, was just another type of exploitation and a sinister marketing tactic to not hook only you, but also your entire family on French fries and soda pops. That's probably me being a bit dramatic, sinister isn't the right word to use. Probably manipulation, but that's like all marketing. It really seemed like the public perception of clowns was shifting in a more positive direction. They were cheerful and friendly and ever present to you and your family. The pendulum swung to positive clown vibes, and in the next decade swung into the dark clown abyss, and this time there was no going back. In 1972, a building contractor who works as Pogo the Clown at children's parties begins to lure young men and boys to his home just outside of Chicago. John Wayne Gacy would continue to capture and kill victims until 1978. Police found victims in a crawl space under Gacy's house, as well as buried beneath his home and throughout his property grounds, in addition to waterways south of Chicago. Gacy is one of the most prolific serial killers in US history, and his atrocities were splashed across all types of media nationwide constantly. The public was seeing Gacy's Pogo the Clown more than Ronald McDonald. But now the public got to see what was under the clown makeup and the costume. The mystery was revealed, and it was a man filled with an unimaginable amount of evil. And it wasn't fiction. This was reality. Reality struck again in 1987, when strange and creepy clown sightings were reported in Brookline, Massachusetts. Children said they witnessed men dressed up as clowns and attempted to lure them into a van. The panic spread throughout the Midwest and Northeast of America. The sightings eventually stopped, but then started up again in 1985 in Phoenix, again in 1991 in Jersey, Honduras in 1995, and in 2016 more sightings were reported in Greenville, South Carolina. Whether this was a hoax or not, it has been very haunting and it was very highly publicized. In 1986, Stephen King introduced us to the only clown that could rival Ronald McDonald in popularity. Pennywise from the book It. Pennywise to me is incredibly horrifying, especially at this time, because he is the manifestation of whatever the children fear itself. He lures children in with his seemingly sunny personality, baggy silk suit of silver with orange pom-poms, and a collar ruff. He was the unassuming kids clown that just happened to steal your paper boat and eat you, and hallucinations may apply as well. Pennywise struck fear into people who didn't even read the book. The story of Pennywise the Clown was passed on like a campfire ghost story. Thankfully, in 1988, we get a reprieve from killer clowns with Killer Clowns. Killer Clowns from Outer Space is a sci-fi horror about murderous aliens that happen to look just like circus clowns, that crash land via comet in a small town. If you aren't familiar, you may think to yourself, reprieve? Where is the reprieve? I don't see any. But this film is so ludicrous and wacky and fun, it's one of my favorites. But then the 90s came and Pennywise came back. This time, the book It by Stephen King was adapted into a miniseries that took whatever fearful image your mind conjured when reading the book and amplified it when Tim Curry donned the Pennywise makeup and costume and completely transformed into a monster. From this point on, clown imagery was everywhere. Even musicians were donning clown makeup, sometimes hoping to trigger humor and sometimes looking to trigger fear, sometimes maybe both. Countless smaller cult horror films revolving around clowns dropped one after another. And clowns appeared once again on television, this time with Krusty the Clown, a humorous but dark satirical look at clowns on The Simpsons. And from that point on, clowns just got darker and more sinister. Now when we see clown imagery, it triggers anxiety and fear. There were centuries on top of centuries of mystery and complexities, and clowns holding up a funhouse mirror to society, giving us a distorted philosophical reflection of that time, all to deliver a message that was just as veiled as the clowns themselves. So maybe it isn't the makeup or ruffles on clowns that scare us. Maybe we fear what they represent. the unknown, the masked, the sense of false security and safety. Maybe in some cases we even fear the very image and message they deliver through their strange acts and antics. Maybe we fear our own society and what we have created. Maybe we fear ourselves. And in that regard, maybe in some ways, clowns have always been scary. If you stayed till the very end, thank you so much. I hope you were at least entertained. And I want to give an extra special thank you. Don't want to get emotional, don't want to get sappy, but I really want to, acknowledge this. I got so much love on my Marilyn Monroe video, and I spent probably 2 to 3 months completely working on that. I was making Marilyn Monroe my life. I really wasn't expecting any type of reception, except maybe like my mom watching it, but that's not like why I put it out. I put it out because it was cool shit and interesting to me. And I was just like, let me put this information out there. I feel like I researched very thoroughly and I really tried my best. I'm glad you guys were entertained and happy with that. I know it wasn't perfect. I know I'm not everyone's cup of tea. I totally get and understand that. I am a meme factory. I cuss. I am weird. So if I'm not your flavor, that's fine. You can move along to the next tea. I'm not offended. But more importantly, it's been a really hard few weeks for my family. We're not gonna cry in lashes. We're not doing that. It's been a really hard week for my family. My grandmother passed away a few days ago, and as most grandmothers are, she was the light of our life. We're a very big family, and it was a really hard week in the hospital constantly. And as I waited and worried and doom scrolled, because what else can you do? Just passing the time by, I kept getting these notifications from YouTube from all these lovely people and new subscribers that were just super kind and lovely. And it was truly a bright light for even a second. It lasted much longer than that, in a really dark time. And I cannot say thank you enough. I was not expecting that. Obviously, I'm not some good YouTuber. I'm not gonna get boogery. I'm gonna wrap this up. I just want to express my gratitude. This has been a video I've been wanting to do for a year and a half. If you've seen my other content, I'm big on horror. I love horror content. I want to explore into more things. I have a lot of ideas, things I'm curious about, but clowns always got me. Like, I've always been so intrigued by them, and I have done, again, a buttload of research, and I hope you like it. I hope you learned something new and you are entertained. One more thank you for the road. Thank you for taking time out of your day to listen to me ramble about nonsense, and I don't know proper outros, so thank you again for the road. 100 thank yous. I'm the worst.